class would be your thrombocytes, specifically your platelets. I'll be uploading a video discussion after this. So our topic for today would be your thrombocytes, also known as your platelets. So in the prelims, we had a brief background on your platelets. Now, your platelets would arise from the megakaryocytic line. So, if you recall, class, in the prelims, meron tayo yung mga stem cell. Then, yung mga theory na pluripotential and unitarian theories. Now, one of the theories wherein one stem cell would give a rise to 3 or more cell lines. So, one of those cell lines is your megakaryocytic cell line. So kapag tinanong kayo sa exam nyo, at what cell line do your thrombocytes or platelets come from? It would be from your megakaryocytic cell line. Now, this is the only cell line that does not undergo mitosis. So based on your cytogenetics and your mol bio, if you had a subject like that, yung mitosis nyo, class, would refer to the multiplication of a cell. So magmumultiply yung cell nyo. From a single cell, it would become 2 through the use of your mitosis, yung mga anaphase, and so on and so forth. The only problem dito, class, sa platelets nyo, they do not undergo mitosis. If you recall, yung megakaryocyte nyo, as they become mature, the cytoplasm increases. Lumalaki yung cytoplasm nyo. And when your cytoplasm increases and it reaches the stage of mature megakaryocyte, naging mature megakaryocyte na siya. Naging mature megakaryocyte na siya. Magpa-fragment siya. So kapag tinanong kayo, how are platelets produced? They are produced by fragmentation. So when you say fragmentation, class, nagbibiyak-biyak sa Tagalog, nagwawatak-watak. They become small platelets. So kapag tinanong what is the composition of your platelets, they come from the cytoplasm of your mature megakaryocyte. So again, your platelets arise from the megakaryocytic line. They do not undergo mitosis. They do not undergo division, cell division, but instead, they come from the fragmentation of your mature megakaryocyte. And your mature megakaryocyte has increased cytoplasm space. Now, your platelets, class, could appear circular to ellipsoidal in shape and has a size of 2 to 4 micrometers in diameter and has a volume of 6 to 7.5 femtoliters. Now, compared mo siya sa red blood cell, which has a normal MCV of 80 to 100, sobrang liit niya, around less than 1% of the original of the size of your RBC. So again, your platelets would appear circular to ellipsoidal, has a size of 2 to 4 micrometer in diameter, and has a volume of 6 to 7.5 femtoliters. Now, there are two important factors responsible for platelet maturation. The first one would be your megakaryocyte colony stimulating factor. So if naalala nyo, class, nung prelims nyo, I gave you a homework about yung mga cytokines. Now, this cytokines, class, this can be hormones. Pwede siyang hormones. Pwede siyang proteins. Pwede siyang organic matter. Now, they would often cause stem cells to proliferate. So, an example of your cytokines, class, would be your erythropoietin. So, erythropoietin would be responsible for the production of your RBC. Now, one of the cytokines would be your megakaryocyte colony stimulating factor, also known as your CSF MEG. Now, this would cause your stem cells to proliferate and differentiate into the megakaryoblast. So, if you recall, ito yung stem cell nyo, ito yung megakaryocytic cell line nyo, it would then become a megakaryoblast, a megakaryocyte, and so on and so forth. Then another one would be your thrombopoietin. Now, your thrombopoietin would have the same effect as your erythropoietin. Thrombopoietin would stimulate differentiation and maturation of the megakaryocyte. Influences the size and the number of platelets. So again, your two important factors are your megakaryocyte colony stimulating factor, or also known as your CSF MEG, and your thrombopoietin. Now, if you're going to be asked how do platelets propagate or multiply, they would propagate via fragmentation. Now, your platelet structures class are derived from selective fragmentation of the cytoplasm of the mature megakaryocyte. So I've already explained this. So galing sila class sa cytoplasm ng mature megakaryocyte niyo. Now, your platelets have multiple pointed filaments. So imagine this would be your platelet. They would have very small class. If you will be able in the future to look at this in a microscope, hindi nyo sila makikita. But they have very small multiple pointed filaments or tentacle-like protrusions. And your platelets, sabi ko nga, would appear round, oval, spindle, and even discoid in shape with smooth margins. Now, upon staining class, your platelets would appear light blue in color. Light blue in color with variable small blue granules, which tends to aggregate in the center called granulomere, also known as your chromomere, while the peripheral or marginal zone is called the hyaline area with a sky blue color. So to simplify this class, yung platelets nyo may dalawang zone siya. May dalawang area siya. The first one would be your granulomere, also known as your chromomere. This is the central part. Central part yan. And ang itsura niyan class would be would appear like light blue in color pag in-stain ng right stain. While yung second zone niya would be the hyaline area. Now, this would appear in the periphery. So, pag sinabi niyong periphery, yung outer area. Ito, dito. Periphery siya, and it would appear sky blue. Sky blue in color. Okay. So again, your platelets class are derived from fragmentation of the mature megakaryocyte. They have multiple pointed filaments or tentacle-like protrusions. They would appear round, oval, spindle, and discoid in shape. Now, they have two zones. The first one would be your granulomere or chromomere. This is the central area and would appear light blue in color. And the second zone is known as your hyaline area, which is the peripheral, which is located in the periphery, sa gilid, and is known as and would appear sky blue in color. Now, 2/3 of your platelets are found in the circulation, while 1/3 naman is found in the spleen. So, parang 70% nasa circulation, 30% naman would be found in the spleen. So, ganyan ang dissemination ng platelets nyo sa body class. Now, your damaged platelets are removed by macrophages in the spleen. So, always remember class, yung spleen nyo would always be the graveyard of your hematopoietic cells. Diyan pinapatay yung mga wala nang kwenta na mga cells. Now, functions of platelets class. We have your primary hemostasis. Now, just to give you a brief background class sa primary hemostasis, kasi this is part of your hemato. Ang primary hemostasis nyo class comes in 3 steps. And this would only happen if you have an injury. Let's say nasugat yung finger mo, or nasugat yung braso mo. The first thing that your body would do would be vasoconstriction. Now, from the word vaso, meaning vessel, and constriction, meaning to tighten, what would happen, class, is that imagine this is your this is the vein, or even the capillary. Nagkaroon ka ng sugat. Now, this would be your injured site. Now, what the body would do, class, is that your veins would then start constricting to lessen the blood flow and to prevent bleeding. After that, class, you would have what we call adhesion. Adhesion, pag sa Tagalog, meaning to attach. So, this is done by your platelets. So, pag less na yung blood flow, your platelets now would come together toward the site of the injury. Then, after that, class, they would now perform aggregation. And when you say aggregation, they would clump together. Magtitikit-tikit yan, class, until they form a sort of what we call hemostatic plug. Hemostatic plug. Para siyang what we call this, parang cover. Kaya pansin nyo kapag nagkaroon kayo ng sugat, class, nagkakaroon siya ng peklat. That's one of the effects of having a hemostatic plug. Hanggang sa matabunan na and there would no longer be bleeding. Then there would be also responsible also for blood coagulation as well as for clot retraction. Now, your clot retraction, class, would happen due to the presence of actomyosin and thrombostenin. So these are two types of protein, class. These are two types of protein that would remove the clot and would replace it with a protein barrier. So, pag na-notice nyo yung sugat nyo, class, habang tumatagal, merong parang, what's the right word for this? Parang peklat na maitim. Tapos, pag tinanggal mo, magbi-bleed ulit. Now, that's the effect of your actomyosin and thrombostenin. Now, it would remove the clot and replace it with a protein barrier. Now, your platelets also helps in the localization of bacteria and other small objects. So, pag yung platelets nyo may na-encounter siyang bacteria, may na-encounter siyang mga foreign materials, they would signal WBCs and other antibodies come and kill the foreign organism or bacteria. So again, sa primary hemostasis niya, there are 3 steps: vasoconstriction, adhesion, aggregation. Platelets are also responsible for blood coagulation. It is also responsible for clot retraction via actomycin or thrombostinin, and would help in the localization of bacteria and other small objects. Now let's talk about the biochemistry of your platelets. So when you say biochemistry, ano ba yung chemical composition nila? So your platelets are composed of 60% protein, 50% lipids, 8% carbohydrates, mainly your glycogen, and sulfate mucopolysaccharide. Now, you may be wondering, kapag tinotal mo yan, it would only total to 83%. Now, what happened to the 17%? Now, your 17% class are composed of your minerals and other elements. So, hindi na yun sinama. Just focus on the 3 main components niya: protein, lipids, and carbohydrates. Pag inas kayo, what is the main composition of your platelet? It would be your proteins. While what are the types of carbohydrates present in your platelet? It would be glycogen and sulfate mucopolysaccharide. Now let's discuss them one by one. Now your proteins would include thrombostinin, fibrinogen, amino acid, and enzymes such as your glutamic acid, aspartic acid, alanine phosphatase, and your transaminase. So when you say transaminases class, this would refer to your ALT and your AST. Then you also have your lipids, which includes phosphatidyl ethanol amine and phosphatidyl serine. Now other elements would include magnesium, calcium, potassium, 5-hydroxytryptamine. Then their granules are made up of polysaccharides. So if you're going to be asked in your quiz or exam, what is the composition of your platelet granules? It would be polysaccharide. Now we have your so-called action of platelets class, where the hyalomere spreads over and granules aggregate to form a loose mass. Occurs when in contact with foreign materials. Now, itong viscous materials nyo class, imagine this would be your platelet. Now, it would encounter a virus or a bacteria. Now, what it would do class is that it would expand. Mag-i-expand yung hyalomere niya. And it would expand to the point that it would aggregate. Didikit siya ngayon. Didikit siya dun sa foreign material. And that would be possible because meron siya, diba kanina, meron siya mga protrusions. That's one of the possible reasons. Kaya dumidikit ang platelets niya sa foreign materials. And that action is called viscous metamorphosis. Again, your viscous metamorphosis class is the action of platelets where the hyalomere spreads over and granules aggregate to form a loose mass. And this would occur when in contact with foreign elements. Now let's discuss the parts of the platelet. Let's first discuss your hyalomere or the peripheral zone. Now this is composed of the membranes and is responsible for platelet adhesion and aggregation. Now yung peripheral zone nyo has even 3 areas or 3 zones. The first one would be your glycocalyx. Now, your glycocalyx class is a fuzzy coating and is primarily composed of glycoproteins such as factor 5, factor 8, and 5 renogen. Now, itong mga factor 5, factor 8 na to class, this would be part of your hematome. But just to give you a brief background, yung factor 8 nyo class, this is also known as your von Willebrand. Von Willebrand's factor. So again, your glycocalyx is a fuzzy coating and is primarily composed of glycoproteins such as factor 5, 8, and 5 renogen. Now, after your glycocalyx class, we have your plasma membrane. Now, this is located lies beneath the glycocalyx and is composed of a bilayer of asymmetrically distributed phospholipids embedded with integral proteins such as arachidonic acid, glycoproteins 1b, and glycoproteins 2b and 3a. So, just to further, para mas maintindihan nyo to class, palaki natin yung platelets nyo. Now, we're talking about here the peripheral zone or the hyalomere. Now, yung glycocalyx nyo class, this is your glycocalyx. Yan yung coating ng platelets nyo. And it is composed of factors 5, 8, and 5 renogen. Factors 5, 8, and 5 renogen. Now, sa ilalim ng glycocalyx nyo, pag pumasok ka, would be your plasma membrane. Si plasma membrane nyo class is composed of phospholipids embedded with proteins such as arachidonic acid. So, try to remember yung mga contents nila. Arachidonic acid, glycoprotein 1p and 2b and 3a. And then the last part would be your submembrane area, the site where messages from external membrane are translated into chemical signals causing activation and physical changes in the platelet. So let's add another area here. So this would be your submembrane. Now, yung submembrane nyo, area nyo class, let's say nandito yung mga granules nyo sa chromomere. Now, when it detects na may mga may sugat, may foreign material, magsisend yan ngayon ng signal sa submembrane nyo. And your submembrane now class would now lead to activation and the physical changes in your platelets. So, pwede na siyang mag-adhesion or mag-aggregation depending on the needed action to be done of your platelets. Now, another part would be your sol-gel membrane. Now, this would lie directly beneath the platelet membrane and is composed of your microfilaments and microtubules. So, imagine this would be your platelet. So, kanina bilog siya. This would be, let's look at it in a, ano bang tawag sa view na to? Peripheral view ba or ano? Basta it would be found in the beneath of your platelet membrane and is composed of microfilaments which contains proteins, actin, and myosin. So, si actin and myosin nyo class would stimulate the platelet to interact to form actomyosin. So, sa microfilaments nyo class, there is actin and myosin. Now, if you would combine them, they would form what you call actomyosin, also known as your thrombostenin. Now, itong si actomyosin nyo class is very important in clot retraction. Now, another part of your sol-gel zone would be your microtubules. Now, your microtubules naman class is composed of the protein tubulin. So, itong tubulin na to class is responsible for maintaining the platelets this shape. So, again, microfilaments nyo, they contain actin and myosin, which upon stimulation would form actomyosin, also known as thrombostatin, which is important in clot retraction. While for your microtubules, it is composed of the protein tubulin, which is responsible for maintaining the platelets discoid shape. And the last one, the third one would be the organelle zone. Now this is the centromere, which is the source of secretory products. So when you say secretory products class, this would refer to your granules. So we have your alpha granules, your dense bodies, and your lysosomal granules. So let's discuss them one by one. Your alpha granules class is the most numerous and contains PDGF, heparin neutralizing factor, plasminogen activator inhibitor, fibronectin, beta thromboglobulin, thrombopoietin protein, albumin, fibrinogen, also known as factor 1 and factor 5. So do try to memorize yung contents ng alpha granules. Then there's also your dense bodies, which contains ADP, ATP, calcium, magnesium, epinephrine, serotonin, and pyrophosphate. Now your dense bodies class are very important in platelet aggregation. Then we also have your lysosomal granules. Now your lysosomal granules class would contain acid phosphatase and hydrolytic enzymes that enhance activation of the intrinsic system. So itong intrinsic system na to class, this would be part of your secondary hemostasis. So whenever you hear the word lysosomal class, this would tend to responsible for destruction or hydrolysis. Wait lang. Okay. Then another part of your platelet would be the dense tubular system. Now, this is derived from the smooth endoplasmic reticulum and would sequester calcium for platelet activation process. It is responsible for synthesizing prostaglandin. Then there's also the surface connecting system, which is an open canalicular system, acts as a canal for the release of the granular content and cytoplasm to the exterior of the platelet, involved in platelet phagocytosis. So from the word surface connecting system class, this would para siyang passage or daanan for your for the release of yung contents ng granules niyo, involved in platelet phagocytosis. While your dense tubular system is responsible for platelet activation and synthesizing prostaglandin. Now let's go to your platelet disorders. So I'm just gonna go through yung mga common na platelet disorders. Now one of those would be your Hemler's anomaly. Now your Hemler's anomaly class is a defect wherein no granules is found in the cytoplasm of the platelet. So walang granules class na nakikita sa cytoplasm. Now, it is characterized by a normal absolute count. So, normal yung absolute count ng platelets nyo. And can be found in hemorrhagic disorders. Then, we also have your so-called atypical platelets. So, instead of the normal size of 2 to 4 micrometer, your atypical platelets have a large size of 4 to 7 micrometers. Then, thrombocytopenia and thrombocytosis can either be present. So, when you say penia, it would refer to decrease, while cytosis would refer to an increased platelet. Then, there's also the presence of giant platelets, increase yung hyalomyria class. So, very big yung peripheral area niya. Then, granule is decreased or absent. Platelets would appear gray in color. When stained, would appear very pale blue, and it is irregularly shaped. Then there's also what we call platelet satelloidosis. Platelets would encircle the periphery of a neutrophil. So imagine this would be your platelets. And this would be your neutrophil. Then platelets would encircle it at the periphery. Palibot class. This can be caused by EDTA. Kaya class, in some laboratories, when they perform platelet count, instead of EDTA, they would replace it with sodium citrate. Kasi ayaw nilang mangyari itong platelet satelloidosis. Then we also have your Bernard-Solier syndrome, which is a platelet adhesion defect. So that ends